which in my mind is one of those things where it's like there's no reason not to. So how do we get everybody to sign up for this and participate in these sorts of activities? And hopefully that can be a first step for a lot of brands and retailers. So after our initial pilot, ThreadUp has since expanded its retail as a service offering to several other major brands, which is really exciting to see. And we've recently launched actually a new donation program with them as well, so that allows customers to recycle any clothes that maybe aren't eligible for resale. And ThreadUp will donate $5 to the Circular Fashion Fund. So lots of work in progress, lots of things that hopefully are really trying to fuel circularity innovation in fashion.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. Yeah, I worked at COVID at a charity shop called here in the UK, probably thrift store or something in the US and otherwise. And we were taught how to sort, and it was probably like 80% we were told just goes to like some sort of recycling thing. So it's great that that's taken into consideration as well, and that those sort of methods are implemented and not disregarded. I wasn't sure, I hadn't known much about your rental platform. How does that sort of work?
We don't do a direct rental program at this point. We just have a partnership with Rent the Runway here in the US.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you very much, Kathleen. Over to you, Tom. Kind of a similar question. Tell us a bit about yourself, Farfetch, and you do resale and repair. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, hi. So Tom Berry. I've been working at Farfetch for about 3 years now. I've been in the kind of sustainability field for about 20 years, but mainly in kind of consumer goods. So it's been my last 3 years, first foray into the fashion industry, which has been exciting and a kind of rapid learning curve. But most people probably know Farfetch, but we're kind of a big and relatively complex business. We describe ourselves as the platform for the luxury industry, and that has a number of different connotations. So we have Farfetch.com, which is the marketplace, which is what most consumers would know about, which is where we are an online e-commerce retailer. But we also have a number of other bits of the business. So we have Farfetch Platform Solutions, which runs that e-commerce type solution for other brands and retailers. So most notably, we run the e-commerce solution for Harrods. So that's a big chunk and a big growing chunk of the business. And then we also own a brand business through NGG, so that we actually manufacture and create brands in the part of the business, and own a store in London called Brown's Boutique. So yeah, there's a number of different bits to the business, and I guess sustainability, our kind of mission on sustainability is the same as our global mission about being a platform for the luxury industry. It's just, we also don't just want to be any platform. We want to be a platform for good, and for us that's about enabling people to take more positive choices in fashion, and that has a number of aspects that we can't go into today. But one of the core pillars, we've got 4 core pillars of the strategy. One of those is circularity, and that's all about reducing waste in the fashion industry, and the things that we can do to enable that kind of reduction of waste across all those different aspects of the Farfetch business that I talked about. Some of it is around, and some of the kind of vision for Farfetch was always around kind of better matching supply and demand in the industry. You know, we were set up as a marketplace, and part of Jose's vision was that there were these kind of amazing stock in one part of the world, which someone in another part of the world would like to access and get hold of, but couldn't, because there wasn't a kind of a method for doing that. So part of that kind of better matching supply and demand is still a core part of the Farfetch vision today, and there's lots of things which we can do to kind of lean in on that. So using our data to support the brand partners that we have to help them better produce and better meet the demand in the market, rather than producing things they're not sure about whether they're going to sell or not. There are interesting models around kind of made to order, some of which we've started piloting through some of the customized work which we do, which again, you're kind of only making what people want. So there's a bunch of stuff on that side, which again, don't have time to talk about today. But yeah, in terms of then the new business models, which do then help also reduce waste, as you say, we've piloted and now starting to scale up three different models in the space really. One we call Farfetch Second Life, which is our resale service. So that's where we offer to customers at the moment just for handbags, although we're looking to scale it to other categories, to buy back their handbags for them. So the handbags, luxury handbags, are expensive investment items, and they hold their value pretty well. And so lots of people are interested in selling them. Some people have vast wardrobes they didn't realize kind of had that value. So kind of offering them a service where they can easily extend the life of those. That's what we try and do through Farfetch Second Life. We also have we call it Farfetch Donate. It's actually based on a resale model. We currently only operate it in the UK, although looking to expand it. And yes, working with a company called Thrift Plus, who's similar to the Ref model. They basically they take items from consumers, and it's a consignment sale site. They're selling them, but the consumer promise there is that half the proceeds will go to the charity that they've selected, and half of them will come back to that consumer as Farfetch credit. So we call it our donate model because it's got a strong charitable element to it, and it allows consumers to kind of clear out their closet, clear out their wardrobe. But yeah, it's based on a resale model, and deliberately so, because I feel like it will enhance the value, and it helps people want to look after the clothes which they've got in the wardrobe because they feel there's some value at the end of the day in it. So that's Farfetch Donate. And then lastly, we only a month or so ago we launched Farfetch Fix with a company called The Restory in the UK, but the service is offered globally, and it's a repair service, where repair and restoration service for mainly, again, shoes and handbags, although again the category expansion on that is going to be pretty rapid, I think. And they're all great services. They're all going really well, like in terms of numbers of consumers wanting to sign up to them, but we've only just started kind of scratching the surface on them, really, like in terms of countries where we want to operate them, in terms of the categories which we're serving, and in terms of aspirations for what we want to do for that whole pillar of work around circularity. So we've set ourselves 2030 goals on all of the the 4 key sustainability pillars we have, and on that one we want the whole Farfetch business, to be more circular than linear, which is about selling more what we call circular products, upcycled material products, recycled material products, pre-owned products, which we have a pre-owned section on the website, and uses of circular services. So kind of selling more of those things than we do sell the kind of products which are made in a more linear fashion.
Great, thanks, Tom. And just for context, what sort of countries have you implemented these platforms in?
Sorry, I missed the first part of that? If that was a question for me.
Yeah, sorry. You mentioned that you've sort of piloted it or implemented in a few countries to start off with. What countries are those?
Yeah, so the Farfetch Second Life, the resale service, is now live in almost all European markets and in the US, and looking to scale that this year. Farfetch Donate, as I said, is only launched in the UK, but again, looking to expand that geographically this year. And Farfetch Fix, it's all served from the UK, but you're able to access the service from almost any country in the world. But obviously that then means you're sending items in to be the atelier, which the Restory have in London, is incredible. And so for some items, it's definitely worth kind of sending them, but but obviously ultimately it would be better to have kind of services in local markets.
So imagining how this works internally, so when someone sells, in this case mainly bags, where does the bag then go when it's brought to Farfetch?
Yeah, so all of these models are done through partnerships. So we built the tech kind of front end and manage all the customer in the same way that we have a marketplace, where we're dependent on boutiques in the industry. That we have partners. So we've got one partner who services the US market at the moment, one partner who services the European market at the moment. So when a customer wants to sell a bag, they submit photos and bit of information that those, depending on where that customer is, that then gets diverted to one of the partners that we have. And then they provide a quote through the Farfetch platform that gets sent to a customer. If the quote's agreed to, then the customer sends the bag. For them, they're sending it to Farfetch. It actually goes to one of our partner warehouses for quality check and authentication. And then if it passes that, they get the Farfetch credits in their account within 24 to 48 hours. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. Perfect. Then, Tansi, now moving on to you. Obviously, the big question, mainly, especially for companies, is what is the ROI, or as you call Rosie, of these programs? You've done some great research on this with Reformation, for example, as well. So please introduce yourself, what you're doing at NYU Stern, and give us a bit of an insight into the results that came out of your research.
Thank you so much, Tanya, and congratulations. I love that Innovation Forum is doing this, terrific conference. So, and thanks for inviting us all, and great to hear Kathleen and Tom and the great work they're doing. So, I founded Center for Sustainable Business at NYU Stern about 5 years ago. Prior to that, I ran Rainforest Alliance for 15 years. So brought the focus on sustainable supply chains to Stern. Our focus is really on helping current and future business leaders embed sustainability core to business strategy, so it drives better financial performance as well as better societal performance. So one way in which we're helping companies in various sectors deliver on that is to better understand and develop methodologies to track the return on sustainability investment. Right now, what we see a lot of studies that are correlating big data, right? So looking at a positive correlation between sustainability and corporate financial performance, or ESG, and investment portfolio performance. But these are just correlations, they're big data, right? And when you look under the hood, you don't really know why, you don't know what's driving that, because mostly companies are actually not tracking the return on their sustainability investment. They put out, robust, some of them do, not all, robust sustainability strategies. Then those strategies get implemented and the impacts are in a variety of different parts of the company. So you might have positive benefits for HR, you might have positive benefits for procurement or for marketing, but all of those are in different places and not generally aggregated. And intangibles like risk mitigation, for example, is not tracked. So we set out to design a methodology called Rosie Return on Sustainability Investment that identified 9 different mediating factors that can then drive better financial performance when you embed sustainability. And those factors include innovation and growth, operational efficiencies, employee engagement, retention, risk mitigation, improved customer loyalty and sales marketing, earned media, stakeholder engagement, better stakeholder relations, and so on. Any kind of good management, when you think about it, a variety of different things can drive more innovation or operational efficiency. But what we're seeing is that sustainability is actually that next sort of filter for driving good management. It can drive good management and good financial performance across all these different ways. So we have looked at this in automotive, in agribusiness, in pharma, et cetera. And at the end of last year, after partnering with Reformation, Eileen Fisher, REI, and others, we announced and launched a sustainable apparel framework for Rosie for return on sustainability investment. We identified about 8 strategies that companies use that we then broke down into different practices, which you could then monetize. So it's really at the practice level versus at the sustainability strategy level that you can monetize. So for example, a number of strategies include resources in the apparel sector, like reducing energy or greenhouse gas emissions, reducing water use, reducing waste. Another strategy is circularity. Another strategy is employee well-being in the supply chain and in your own corporate employees, et cetera, right? But so for each one, you then need to identify, all right, looking at circularity, for example, across the value chain, where are the different opportunities to create financial value as well as, of course, societal value in terms of reduced waste and so on. And so we identified that, first of all, there's kind of 4 large categories of circularity, and we heard a variety of them from Kathleen and Tom, ranging from product longevity, reducing product returns, to product take-back programs, to circular packaging as well. So not only the product, but the packaging. Within each of those 4 areas, then you might have very specific things that you're doing, as Reformation and Farfetch are. So then we did work with Reformation and Eileen Fisher to look at the benefits on how you would monetize them of their circular strategies. And what we found, which is really fascinating, is that, of course, there's the sales of the product themselves. And in Eileen Fisher's case, they have their own Renew line. In Reformation's case, it's through the ThreadUp program, as well as some of their vintage products and so on. But and then there is the increased sales. So as you work with customers to give them the opportunity to purchase reused product, they also tend to get excited and use their coupon or their credit or whatever to buy additional product, right? And that's been very effective, as we've seen. Another area that we saw is that it brings in new customers, right, at a very low acquisition cost, right, because it's happening either through your partner platforms or through potential customers hearing about this. So Eileen Fisher, for example, has generally an older demographic, and they were able, through the Renew program, to bring in a younger customer, which is, for very little incremental cost, which is really beneficial for them. And I know Reformation, through the work they're doing, also is bringing in additional customers, again, for a much lower acquisition cost. The other area that we saw that's very interesting is earned media, right? You can also, through these types of programs, at least now while this is in its exciting new phase, get a lot of good publicity for free for this, right? And so you can actually monetize that. So there's a series of ways in which companies, I think, can begin to understand the financial returns. We also looked in the apparel sector at things like employee productivity and retention when you had a purpose-oriented focus. So with REI, for example, we saw that they were generating, it was about $34 million worth of reduced cost related to retention and increased productivity on an annual basis as a result of their purpose orientation. And we also saw things like, reduction as you sort of make climate change commitments and reduce your air freight and move it more into cargo, into shipping and trucking. Not only do you reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but you reduce cost. And given the volatility of energy costs today, that also can really help your bottom line. So a whole series of ways in which we were able to work on this, and really enjoyed the process with Reformation, amongst others.
Great, thanks, Tansi. And how have brands been sort of responding to this research? How are you engaging with brands on this? And do you then help them implement these sort of platforms afterwards, or where does the conversation go from there?
Yeah, so we're delighted. Brief commercial. This is all on our website. It's all open source. You can access these tools and go to town with it on your own. But we're also delighted to work with individual companies or with new sectors to work through how they can apply Rosie and what they can learn from it. And we find that it can be useful initially anyway to have a third party because, again, typically companies do not have this data easily available. It's not, you're not set up to find this data, to aggregate it, to track it, to put in place the things you need to around some of these intangibles. So sometimes having a third party help do that can be very helpful. One other point that I'd just like to make on that is that for those who are leading sustainability in their organizations, oftentimes there's a language problem with the CFO. Like you're talking, I'm excited about my greenhouse gas emissions, and the CFO is like, I'm so excited about my return on assets this year. So how do we actually cross that bridge? Is what Rosie can help one do, is really have everybody begin to speak the same language, and that also I think can be very exciting for companies.
Great. Thanks, Chauncey. I'm seeing there's a few questions coming in already on the Pathable platform. So again, to anyone listening, if you have any questions, put them right there. But Haven's first question, which kind of goes into something that you mentioned, Chauncey, as well, about sort of increasing your customer base through these new platforms. I would love to turn the question to you, Tom. Obviously, Farfetch, you have quite a luxury portfolio, more on that upper scale. Do you have an idea of the percentage of people who are buying resold through your platform? Are they new customers that perhaps weren't able to afford it before, for example?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways which we've looked at it. Actually, in terms of the pre-owned offering that we have on Farfetch, that is kind of very much in line with the luxury positioning that we have as a marketplace anyway, and the customers for that tend to be, they are different. Like, they're really loyal, actually. They buy more and more from Farfetch than other customers. They're also higher spending customers, so they're good, but it's partly around the positioning of that category on Farfetch, in that the pre-owned offering is less with kind of unique items that people can't find anywhere else. That's why they're shopping on Farfetch. It's kind of stuff which they can't get from other places, or things which are just genuinely unique, kind of 1970s Louis Vuitton basketball, or whatever it is. It's like there's a bunch of really interesting things which you can't find anywhere else, as opposed to a lot of the resale industry is, and some of the products that we buy back from customers goes through other channels, is more like off-season thing, kind of products which people have used for a while and just don't want anymore, and it's kind of less that. So we have an amazing set of customers. It's growing rapidly, that kind of pre-owned section, but actually in terms of new customer acquisition, the resale models, so the Farfetch Second Life and Farfetch Donate, they've attracted large numbers of new customers, just because it's a model which people are interested in using. Unless there's a need out there, we know that from customer research, more than half of our customers have either bought or sold pre-owned in the last year already. So they're doing it somewhere. Like, they say, how do we, to Tansi's point, how do we monetize that? Like, all of the sustainability propositions we have on Farfetch are kind of unapologetically commercial in some way or other. And this one, the circular models, are all about how we generate new forms of revenue, either in terms of customer retention and loyalty, which a lot of the resale programs drive, or in terms of new customer acquisition, so kind of customers which we wouldn't have had before. And they've been, it's kind of proven to be really successful in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Just a win-win all around, it seems.
Yeah.
And maybe, Kathleen, over to you. How are you seeing consumers react to this? Obviously, Reformation was kind of built on the idea of sustainability, so perhaps your customers are kind of used to Reformation going above and beyond in this area, but any insight into their reaction? And also would be great to hear what sort of methods have worked best in communicating with consumers on these sort of resale platforms, resale platforms, but then overall in your circularity initiatives.
Yeah, I think resale is becoming a little bit buzzier. We're seeing, to Tom's point, this becoming more mainstream in terms of participating in these sorts of platforms. That wasn't necessarily the case a few years ago when we launched. So we did that with a little bit of like holding our breath. Let's see what actually happens out of this. Let's all like kind of manage expectations. We're not totally sure what participation will look like, and ultimately what impact we could realistically anticipate. So for us, when we started this program, it was all around can we reuse or recycle 100,000 garments this year? Like, let's actually drive for the impact indicators. Like I said, some of the business cascading effects for a little bit of a happy surprise at the end of the first year. So what we've seen is that participation did exceed our expectations, and it has been ramping. we also found that we've been kind of doing some A/B tests and playing with how we engage our customer. We had additional incentive to participate originally. We pulled that back last year just to see if it changed behavior, and maybe no surprise, it did. We saw a reduced participation rate. So I think that as brands and as really industry players that are trying to engage in this, there's still a lot to learn, and I think there's still a lot to share in terms of what are the best practices and how can we drive the most impact together. Our philosophy has always been that the success of these programs is going to be on how easy they are to adopt. So you want to make it as seamless as possible for the customer, similar to how Tom was describing some of the programs. The customer only has to take one step, and then we do a lot of work behind the scenes, or our partners do a lot of work behind the scenes. I think that continues to be necessary, because again, we're competing with the behavior of just throwing it away, which is available to you immediately and right outside your door. So how do you make it easy to participate, and then how do you incentivize that behavior? I think had a really fascinating conversation with a colleague this week where we were saying, like, wouldn't it be amazing that in a few years it's taboo to throw your stuff away? Like, you would never think of it because, like, there's clearly value in those materials. You don't throw away a lot of other durable goods. Like, couldn't we do the same for this? Until we reach that kind of cultural shift, I think we need to be incentivizing the behavior. So, we pay people through gift cards to participate. We make that more material, and we'll continue to kind of play with that threshold of what does that booster on top of those incentives look like, to make sure that we are engaging as many people as possible, reaching those that wouldn't necessarily participate in these programs without that incentive, to drive the most impact.
Great, thank you. Just looking at the other questions, there's a quick one for Tom, just to go into a bit more detail about the difference between Farfetch Second Life and Farfetch Pre-Loved.
Yeah, so Second Life is we have a service for sellers, so people who want to sell stuff, and we have a service for buyers, people who want to buy stuff. The service for sellers is Farfetch Second Life. The service or the offering we have for people who want to buy pre-loved items is pre-loved on Farfetch. It's farfetch.com. It's just we have a pre-loved category on there. So yeah, the two work very closely together, obviously, but yeah, they are different, and that's actually been one of the interesting challenges. Actually, is how do you communicate with all of the, not just Farfetch Second Life, but with all of them? It's like, how do we are, and in the context of Farfetch.com, we're a retailer, and people are coming on to Farfetch.com to shop, and so how do you communicate a service in that context? It's a new thing for consumers to get used to, and for a retailer to understand how and when and in what points of the journey. And so there's a whole load of things which we've been trialing and trying to work out the best ways of engaging people in what is quite a different behavior for them, when actually a lot of their mindset when they come on to Farfetch.com is about being inspired about the latest in the most amazing fashion in the world. Like, it's, that's what they're there to see. So kind of putting a service right in front of them is sometimes a bit tricky.
Mm-hmm. Well, it'd be great to hear about the other ways that you're incentivizing consumers on your website. You mentioned before that you kind of work with brands that you carry in different ways. And I know one of the questions is how, perhaps labeling them somehow online, or how does Farfetch do it how do you do it on your platform to showcase sustainable items and maybe put them front and center to consumers?
Yeah, so that's another whole topic, but we have another pillar of our sustainability strategy is what we call conscious, and so and a big part of that is we have this amazing range of 3,500 brands on the platform, some of which are coming via boutiques like other shops, some of which are coming direct from brands. So we've got this amazing, because we've got such a massive range of brands and products, we have a massive range of really good brands and products who are really good from a sustainability perspective, either at a brand level or at an individual product level. And yeah, our conscious pillar of work is all about how we drive sales of better products. You know, if we're selling something, we should want it to be good, you know, and that's Reformation. It's one of those conscious brands. So we do that in a number of ways. So we kind of tag them, label them, so it's obvious. We provide product descriptions, so if people are shopping, we kind of explain why it's a good product. We've got a product filter, so you can be shopping anything, you know, shopping for a t-shirt, and you've looked at all the t-shirts you want, and there's a little kind of sustainability filter, so you can see the ones of the range which you're looking at, which ones are good. We run dedicated marketing around them, both in terms of multi-brand marketing, so kind of conscious edits, or like community-driven marketing around different conscious selections, or mono-brand marketing, you know, so we work with brand partners to kind of promote particular ranges, and done some of that with Reformation in the past. And so yeah, it's kind of, there's a whole suite of different things which we can do to incentivize consumers to what we say is like choose more positively, like when they're shopping, like, so not when they're looking to service something, like when they're shopping, like how can we incentivize them to choose a better a product.
Yeah. And Kathleen, do you have anything to add to that? I know that obviously Reformation has that fully on their website, but what kind of, you know, what goes into the decision making of that, and how have consumers reacted to it?
You know, it's an evolution for us as well as a brand to figure out what's the right spots in a customer's journey to engage them on mission and talk about impact. Because to Tom's point, some of our customers are just there to buy a dress for an event, and they don't necessarily want a deep dive in the fiber production process or clean chemistry. You know, like they'll just kind of glaze over, and that's not what they're looking for from their experience. So we take a kind of a hierarchied approach. I think we want to ensure that our the awareness of the customers, knowing that there is a positive impact on people on the planet for their purchase at Reformation. That again, we're doing a lot of that work behind the scenes, even if they don't necessarily want the details. You know, we hope that there's some like headlines there that any customer that shops with us can understand and engage with us at that level. And then, you know, within the journey, we want to offer as much detail as that really conscious, uber conscious consumer is looking for. So I think that's really the challenge for brands to unlock, is what is that right balance, and then what does it look like along the journey. But our MO has always been to overshare, provide way more detail than you want. So if you want to see the data sources for our lifecycle tool, you can do that, and you can see that it's publicly accessible. If you want to see the ratings of our facilities and our supplier lists, that's also accessible. So I think the move is to default to transparency, default to oversharing, but do that in a layered way, so that it's not, you know, going to be overwhelming to a consumer that's not necessarily looking for that information. I think some of the things that we've done well and we've been refining over the years is we do have a sustainability section within the product page. So at the product level, you can understand what the value proposition is from a sustainability point of view. So what is its environmental footprint? Where was it made? What are the materials used? And I think more and more consumers are looking for that type of information. And so I think, again, there's increasing demand and responsibility on brands to provide that information. And hopefully we can all get a little bit more creative in how we tell that story, and do that in a really authentic way.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to delve more into the circularity parts of it in just a moment, but I want to turn to you, Tansi, in case there's anything sort of you want to add on and reflect on what's been said. What do you see, and from your experience, that works best to ensure that these sort of programs are successful and scalable?
Yeah, well, I think going back to the point around sort of marketing and how do we market this and how do we engage consumers, and that there's consumers who don't care, consumers who care somewhat, and consumers who really, really care, right? And you need to have your communications managed for all of those. I think what's interesting today is that that group that doesn't care at all is growing smaller and smaller, and that the marketeers who've been working on this for years are scarred with previous forays where they tried promoting an eco line or whatever and just got no interest. And I think things are changing so rapidly right now. So I think that I agree 100% with what Kathleen and Tom said. You have to meet the customer where they are. You can't, they're there to buy a product with particular attributes. They're not there to buy, a no waste thing, right? But it's figuring out how to. I think that's the sort of $1 million question: how to begin to really create authentic, as Kathleen said, messaging that communicates the power of this new model and gets people excited. And I can say, teaching students that this generation, the millennials and Generation Z, much more interested in this. We've done a lot of research where there's a lot of data available around consumer packaged goods, for example. We saw 55% of the growth in consumer packaged goods, that's food and personal care products, came from sustainability marketed products over the last 5 years. And that held true and continued to grow through the pandemic. And, you can talk to a lot of traditional CPG guys and they'll all be, well, people don't want to buy this stuff. And they do, and they're paying a premium, right? So it's a really interesting moment right now. I think we don't have all the answers. There's a lot to learn about how to engage with customers and consumers, but those who really figure out that balance and move and take leadership on it will be the brands that win. Mm-hmm. And there's a final thought I would add is that, as we're seeing increasingly, all the research is showing us that people are holding brands accountable in a way that they didn't before around diversity and inclusion issues and other types of issues, climate change, et cetera, that this trend is just going to grow. It's not going to go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and finding the right ways to speak to consumers. I know, like in the food, this whole idea of carbon labeling on products is big, but then it's, to professionals in the industry, X amount of grams per chocolate bar means something, but to a consumer, they're like, I don't know what this number means. That has no context to me. So,
although just to that quickly, this last year in 2020, we saw for the first time in CPG an emergence of carbon labeling for $1.2 billion worth of product, right? Which people were buying just overnight, virtually. And, they're not going into a lot of detail about the grams, et cetera. They're saying, we're working on renewable energy to do this, right? Or net zero commitments. That's it. They don't, So anyway, just to that point. Sorry.
No, great. I also had a quick question for you, Tansi. Just on consumers from your research and your work, what do you see as the main dynamics of sustainable and ethical fashion that consumers seem to be, caring a lot more? I mean, not to put this in any sort of hierarchy, but what do you see as consumers engaging most in?
I think the waste issue is of real concern to people, to younger people in particular, who are seeing the negative impacts of that. I think climate and water use also, and then I do think very important is the social impacts in the supply chain, the labor rights and sort of plight of women, a lot of women buying fashion and sort of seeing a lot of negative publicity around the negative impacts on women in the supply chain. So I would say those are some of the key areas. I think they're also concerned about packaging as well of these products, and that doesn't stop them from e-commerce where there's lots of packaging and carbon transport and returns and all that. So the translation into action isn't always there, but I do think that those issues are front and center.
Great, thank you. And I know there's a few questions coming up around how to engage consumers and how to talk to them and all of that. And I know that we have a session on that tomorrow as well. So just cautious of time and everything. Just before time is just running away from me, but before sort of some closing remarks, Kathleen, obviously these sort of resale, repair, all these platforms are an important part of the whole puzzle of circularity. But obviously we need to make sure that we're creating strategies that are implementing circularity from the start, from the design stage, to take that end of life that will inevitably come at one point into consideration. So how does Reformation do it, and what are some challenges that you faced in it?
Yeah, such a big question with just a few minutes to go, so I'll try to keep this tight. But I think, like I mentioned in the introduction, we really do think that you need to do circularity across all pillars, right? So you need to design out waste, you need to keep products in use longer, and you need to keep materials in use. So we have within our fiber standards and our sourcing standards a real preference for renewable and recycled materials, and we're really trying to scale up our sourcing of not just vintage and dead stock, which has been kind of the legacy of the brand, but also recycled fibers. I think that the next test for us as brands and to use our platform and our influence with our supply chains is doing more direct take back and facilitating recycling programs. So we're actively working on that right now. We will be launching our first take back program for a new category in just a few weeks, and working on that really across a lot of our product offerings. So it's still the infrastructure and the technology isn't necessarily there, but we're getting closer. And I think, again, it's going to be on us as brands and retailers to help facilitate that process moving forward. So it's something that, again, I think is incredibly exciting, incredibly relevant to any circularity efforts.
Great, thank you. I know, Tansi, you need to leave on the hour. Thanks for joining us, Tom and Kathleen. I'll just keep you on for one last question. One of the attendees was asking sort of, resale platforms might have been seen as potentially brand damaging in the past, or maybe sort of, distracting consumers. Is there anything that's currently potentially seen by brands as something that they don't want to focus on that you think will be the next big thing and the next trend that we'll be talking about maybe next year, maybe in 5 years instead? Tom, over to you first.
The next big thing. Yeah, I don't know. Like the most exciting models I think that I've seen coming through are the made to order models, where you're not making a whole bunch of stuff and hoping that it sells in fashion, and that's partly a kind of technical, partly an operational challenge, in that you've got to do that quick enough so you kind of meet consumer expectations around when products get delivered and when they can have them. But that's starting to happen, I think, and so I think that kind of made to order model will be a really exciting opportunity in the future. But yeah, I actually think in the short term future it's more about, as you would have picked up from Kathleen and myself today, like we're still at the early stages in terms of working out what works with consumers on the models which people know about, like the resale models. How do you make that work with your brand? Like not every resale model, like there's numerous different models within resale, and not every resale model is going to work with every brand, and you wouldn't want to necessarily put your either retail brand or kind of product brand up against every different element of it. So kind of working out what works, I think, is the kind of key challenge next.
Right. Kathleen, big question to answer in just a few seconds.
Yeah, what Tom said. I think he's I can't add much more value to that. I would just say, looking at more direct resale, more direct rental, I think you're going to see that more often than what we've seen in the last 5 years. So just expect that to become more mainstream and to see those things scale.
Great. Well, thank you both, and thank you, Tom, who's had to leave. And thanks to all the listeners for your great questions. This is the last session of the day, so we'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. UK time for Q&A with Ravana Hook. And yeah, thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.